Welcome to the Mind, Body and Soul Show with artist, author and personal development coach John Morris. Inspiring, motivating and educating you on your journey to find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life. Learn from and listen to a man who has a wealth of life experience, from business to bodybuilding, artist to author, and has learned to deal with his own physical and mental wellness. But that's not all. Each week, John will be joined by guests from around the world and all walks of life, where they too will share their knowledge and expertise. And now, we welcome you to today's episode of the Mind, Body and Soul Show with your host, John Morris.
Well, happy Tuesday, folks, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Mind, Body, and Soul Show, where we help you find balance in the craziness of day-to-day life, live here and in living color on the LA Tribune Live Network. I'm your host, as always, John Morris. Welcome you to the show, all the way from sunny Scotland and from wherever you are in the world today. Today's topic is a really interesting and unique one. We're exploring business, but a very, very unique and special business indeed. We're actually exploring the wrestling business and beyond. And my guest today is a former WWE wrestling legend. He is also an author, businessman, owner of OVW Wrestling, and also one of the greatest minds of our generation. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the show once again, my dear friend, all the way from the United States, the great Al Snow. Al, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you, John? Good to see you.
I'm doing good. You've just missed a glorious sunset here, my friend. How are you doing?
Oh, really? Really? Oh,
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that. I know how beautiful it is over there, especially this time of year.
It is. The trees have just changed color and so much more. Al always jokes because, he believes here in Scotland we never see the sun. But we do. We do see the sun.
You see it just briefly every once in a while.
Just briefly, yeah. Yes, indeed. How are things going?
Things are going great. I'm just very happy, and we're not quite where we want to be, but that's part of the journey. You just keep at it. So, and I'm enjoying the journey as much as possible.
That's fantastic, because of course it is more about the journey sometimes than about the destination, which is just phenomenal. Al, today obviously we're going to talk about something very, very different to a lot of our listeners' ears. Obviously you and I have done shows before, we know how this works, but I want to explore with you maybe a subject that you haven't explored on air before, and that is of the wrestling business, as in the psychology behind it and so much more. So if it's okay with you, let's get into it.
Sure.
For people that are watching, how would you describe the psychology of the wrestling business? What is it about this product that really appeals to so many people around the world?
Well, what appeals to an audience in wrestling is not the wrestling itself, but who the people that are performing are. That's what an audience can relate to and connect with, and then live vicariously through those personas, those personalities that are in the ring. And by living vicariously, they can feel like they've climbed that mountain, like they've achieved that goal. That's part and parcel of why wrestling is such an appeal. It connects emotionally and directly with the audience.
That's a phenomenal answer. And one of the questions that came to my mind there, obviously you and I know in any business, storytelling is really the core of anything. If anybody can tell a phenomenal story, you really engage your audience. How important is storytelling within the wrestling industry?
Well, storytelling is that's all that wrestling is. It's the physical art of storytelling within the context of a competitive situation, and as such, you always have to have, and no matter what form of storytelling your story takes place in, you've got to have an antagonist. You have to have a protagonist. you have to have a structure, a set of rules, so that an audience can understand what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. And then you've got to have a goal, something that needs to be achieved or accomplished or completed. And there's either a competition between the antagonist and protagonist, both trying to achieve that goal, or the antagonist is doing everything they can to throw, roadblocks in front of the protagonist to prevent them from achieving or completing or succeeding in that goal. And that, that in wrestling is the be all end all. Now, the magic, the wonderful thing about professional wrestling is that unlike other forms of storytelling, professional wrestling is very much a living, breathing event, I guess you could say. And it's very much a symbiotic story between the audience and the performers that are in the ring. Unlike live theater, say, or movies or books, they're very static. They've been written and they are, they have to follow a certain script. In wrestling, you're living in that moment, and you're interacting with that audience to bring the story to a culmination, to a high point. And the great thing is that what you see tonight, if you're watching that story unfold, you could watch those two performers 100 times, mm-hmm. and it's going to be unique and different every single time because, again, it lives and breathes in that specific moment. Mm-hmm. So, it's very much in that manner. It's very much like watching an actual sporting event. But it's also very much like watching a soap opera or a movie or an action mm-hmm. film at the same time, or a rock concert, and or fireworks. It's all wrapped into one, and I think that's what makes it. It's always had an appeal around the world. It has had, since, gosh, the late 1800s and early mm-hmm. 1900s until modern day. We've had audiences attend by the thousands. Yeah. Professional wrestling events, and most people, I'm sure, in your audience or that are going to listen to this, are going to have professional wrestling. That's it's the maligned redheaded stepchild of entertainment. But I mean, if you really go back and really take note of, again, even just modern wrestling, let's just say the WWE. Look at the number of live events. Let's say a band, U2, that are playing a concert and they have attendance of 20,000 fans, mm-hmm. and everybody's like, oh my gosh, they even after all these years, U2 or the Rolling Stones, or they can still pull in 20,000 fans. They can sell out an arena. Well, guess what? I mean, professional wrestling does that on a weekly basis, and 25, 30 years ago, they were doing it 7 nights a week around the country and around the world. And still today they are doing so. And that's not something brand new. That, in 1961, here in the United States, Buddy Rogers and Pat Connor had an audience of about 41,000 people. Well, no, it was 38,000 people in Kaminsky Park in Chicago. Yeah. Attend a wrestling match. 38,000 people in 1961. And since that time, there have been, shows of that kind of level on a regular basis all over the world, and that just shows and attests, even though, like I said, it's so maligned by the general public and by, the entertainment industry itself. It just shows to show that it's a truly an art form unto itself, and a viable entertainment operation.
I completely agree. And a question that I was going to say for later on, but I think it's a perfect follow-on. Obviously, wrestling has transitioned a lot over the years. You know, the 60s and 70s, when it was filled in arenas with old grannies and grandpas, and they bring their, grandkids and things, and the cigarettes would be hanging out of the mouth, and it was more of a smoke-filled arena. You know, you fast forward 10 years to the 80s, and it was more family orientated. Now it seems to have a demographic of 18 to 30. Many would argue, of course, that it was never hotter than the mid to late 80s and then the latter part of the 90s. How important do you think the transitions have been for the survival of professional wrestling?
Well, wrestling has been and always will be a reflection of whatever modern society it's in at that time, or region or area, are dictated, and the style is dictated and directed by what the audience is composed of, and it's always been a reflection of that audience. And of course, wrestling is going to change, it's going to evolve, it's going to develop based on that audience, and really, quite honestly, nothing more. Ultimately, though, no matter how much it changes, it evolves, it grows, it develops based on the audience. The
Mhm.
audience itself is still only paying to really buy or believe in only two things, and that's been the same from 1901 to
Mhm.
1951 to 1971 to 2021. That aspect of professional wrestling never changes, and that is an audience wanting desperately to believe in who that performer is and why they're in, that they're in there trying to win and not lose, so that win and loss have a consequence to it.
Mhm.
And as long as that win and loss have a consequence, then you have an emotional connection. And then with that emotional connection, you can tell a story and then create what we call heat in
Mhm.
the wrestling business, which is a want, a need, a desire to see that outcome, or see that particular wrestler that they live vicariously through eventually triumph over
Mhm.
the odds or the adversity.
Do you think, and this, it might be a loaded, maybe two-part question, but do you think wrestling, or in terms of storytelling, is as strong as it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s now, or is it just different?
No, it's different, and it isn't as strong
Hmm.
now as it once was, because the talent, the performers themselves, are now trying to sell you what they do,
Hmm.
not who they are and why they do it.
Yeah.
They believe that, and their intent is to try to get to believe in what they're doing physically, not the why they're doing it
Yeah.
physically to each other, the intent behind it. And an audience, you know, it's a matter of relatability, is what it is.
Hmm.
Here in the United States, biggest sports are football, basketball, and baseball. The reason that those are the biggest entertainment sports is because here in the United States, we've all played them as kids, even if we've just picked up a basketball and shot it at a hoop in the driveway, or if we've played baseball in the backyard or touch football. We've all played, as played those as children here. That's why hockey has got a big audience in Canada for it, because it's more children have played hockey as they grew up. That's why soccer is bigger all over the rest of the world than it is here in the United States. The three, I tell people here in the United States all the time, like, use this analogy, and to really drive home the point, I always ask the question of what are the three biggest televised sporting events in the world. And of course, here in the United States, they always go, oh, that's the Super Bowl. And I'm like, no, Super Bowl is nowhere even on that list. And they're like, oh, it must be the World Series of baseball. And I'm like, no, it's not. So, and they never can. They'll guess the World Cup of soccer,
Mhm.
which is number one. But what really surprises them is number three is the World Cup of rugby,
Wow.
because more people play rugby around the world
Mhm.
than here in the United States. And the World Cup of cricket is the second most watched televised sport event in the world. Now, I've watched cricket. I have no clue what's happening. Can't You cannot explain this to me where it makes any sense. Okay, but that's because I've never played it.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to watch it because I have no interest in it. And that applies to professional wrestling.
Mhm.
If we're endeavoring to get you to connect and believe in what we do, it's never going to happen because you've
Yeah.
never been in the ring and you've never done
Right.
it. But if you can connect and believe in who I am, if you know somebody like me or you've always felt sort of like you're similar to me, um, then that's what you're going to really what's going to drive you to want to watch. And why am I out there? I'm wrestling because I'm a professional prize fighter, and if I win, I get paid. If I lose, I don't get paid, or I
Yeah.
don't get paid as much. And so now we know what the consequence is. So now we can start to tell a story based off of that intent to try to win and lose, and that's what everybody can relate to that.
Yeah.
And in
Absolutely.
modern day wrestling, that focus has shifted from the who and why to the what, and that's part and parcel of why it's
Mhm.
starting to have a little bit of a decline.
Yeah. And I do think it's interesting, and as someone who's never been in professional wrestling, but has done, gosh, number of years of amateur wrestling, it's not the same. But it gives you an idea, a little bit of the grappling and competitions and stuff. But someone who's been a fan of it for 30 years, I find it, I think, harder now to connect with it, and it could be an age thing, but also because the people I grew up watching are, either no longer with us or, are now retired. Um, that and there's very little that I sit and watch of it now. I think because I struggle to connect with it in such a way. But to your credit, what you were saying earlier on, when I watched professional wrestling from the 80s and everything was flow, 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 you could feel like these guys want to tear each other's heads off. Whereas now it feels, and we didn't even, I don't think, watch WrestleMania this year, but we watched it, I think, a couple of years ago, and it was so, it was like you're almost waiting for the guy to throw a punch, or you wait, you can feel it's a really different thing. I remember saying to my wife, it feels different. I can't explain it, but it just feels different. Obviously, to the kids that are growing up watching it now, they know no different. And they will still have their superheroes, and that's a really awesome thing. But it's I think one of the thoughts that came into my mind regarding that question of the transitions was everything in business, and you'll know this, Al, of course, but everything in business, it has its ebbs and flows. It goes up and it peaks, and then it comes back down. And I think in some ways now, what I see more and more is the territory days. When you had all the different wrestling organizations around the world, pretty much now. That's starting to happen. In fact, that probably is happening a lot more now. And whenever I talk to the wrestling fans and they're like, "Do you think wrestling could ever go back to what it was in the '80s?" I said, "Absolutely, but it may take 100 years to get back there." If that makes sense to you, any thoughts on that? Just before we move on.
Well, you're right about it being cyclical. I
Mhm.
mean, especially the professional wrestling business always has been very cyclical, and part of because the product are the wrestlers themselves. And no matter what product you're selling, it's always going to have its highs and lows. It's always going to have its popularity, and then it's going to wane or decrease based off of a glut of exposure to that product. That's why car manufacturers are always making new cars, new models, making changes to the automobile design, so that it motivates you to want to buy a new vehicle when almost every year or 2 years, when really you don't really need a new car every single year or every 2 years. But that's how they continue to drive their business and to continue to sell.
Yeah.
The box is that they're always replacing the old to some degree with a newer model.
Yeah.
Professional wrestling is much the same way, and that's why they're cyclical. It also, history will show you that, wrestling, at least within, the United States, has repeated itself a number of times where it's gone on to a national level, and then it's went back to a regional operations, and then went back to a national, then back to a regional, and now it's back again on a national. But now these days it's also on an international level as well. So the likelihood is that it will break back down into regional areas around the United States and around the world, I believe. I feel very confident. But the key to that in its success, its true success, because the death of the regional areas or territories here in the United States resulted in Vince McMahon going around destroying all the territories, as what is the common myth these days. Vince McMahon simply went around and hired up or put in contract all of the talent that really understood how to work the art of professional wrestling, work the art of telling a story and capturing an audience's imagination. And he brought them all to WWF, and in the territories or the regional areas, that left only wrestlers, performers, athletes to wrestle. And when I broke in 39 years ago, the saying when the business was, hey, wrestlers don't make money. Workers, they make money, and they are what drives the business. And in order for the regional, if it goes back to a regional area, regional type business, for it to succeed, you're going to have to populate those territories with workers, artists. Anybody can paint a house. Anybody can be a painter.
True.
And paint a house.
Yeah.
Not everybody can be an artist, and a worker is an artist. It's is someone who can not do it from here, but do it from the heart, from the passion, and that's why certain pieces of art are in museums, is because they evoke a certain passionate response from the people that view it, and that's because the artists themselves, communicated that passion through that piece of art, and that in professional wrestling ultimately is that's what drives the business, is that the passion of that artist, communicating on an emotional level, a story that evokes an emotional response out of an audience and makes them want to experience that over and over again.
I think, and I think that's a phenomenal point as well, that looking from it from a business mindset, Vince did what any good businessman would do. He looked around the United States and beyond and said, who's the best guys here? Who do I want to build my company with? And obviously went ahead and did that. And I think, personally, that's the success of a really good businessman. Phenomenal. Al, we're going to go to commercial break, but when we come back, obviously, we'll be talking more about wrestling and beyond, and a little bit how your transition has taken place. So stay tuned with us, folks, and we will see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We've earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
It's that time of year again! A time of lights, trees, and presents galore. It's also a time filled with stress, worry, and frantic panic in the search for that special gift. What do you buy the person who has everything? The answer, you buy them something that can't be found on the high street or in any shop, but only by special order. You buy them something made with love. Through the power of a paintbrush and the magic of some paint, I create paintings for people from all over the world and in all shapes and sizes. Portraits, pets, landscapes, seascapes, and so much more. Just like Santa, I too love to spread the gift of joy to people all over the world. Christmas can be an immensely stressful time of year. Will they like it? Won't they like it? Well, when you order with us, you're ordering something that your loved one is guaranteed to love. We take all the stress away for you. It is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Send an email with the picture you desire. Choose the size and frame of your choosing, and we will take care of the rest. Shipping is even on us. And if you're looking for something even more unique, why not come and visit our online shop where you can order my best-selling self-help book, which is packed with my artwork. Why not even order my CD and even prints and gift certificates and so much more awaits behind those doors. So what are you waiting for? Come and visit us and click on that link. We're looking forward to hearing from you and helping in any way that we can. And from all of us here, we wish you a very, very Merry Christmas. Okay, folks, we are back. And just before we continue our conversation with the awesome wrestling legend Al Snow, we want to remind you that if you're interested in sponsoring the show and if you've got a business or a message that you want to get out there, get in touch with us at thejohnmorris.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. We have people from around the world sponsoring on various platforms, and this show alone goes into over 50 million homes around the world. What better way could there be to get your message out around the world? So sponsor the show. Keep us on the air. If you love what we do, tell a friend, because it could be the very thing that they need to hear. And now let's continue our conversation with the wrestling legend, Al Snow. Al, welcome back, my friend. I hope you enjoyed that short break, as always. Al, obviously, you have been in the wrestling industry now for nearly 4 decades. Phenomenal feat for sure. At what point did you start to notice that you enjoyed going from more of a wrestling basis of a professional wrestler to more as an instructor or as a teacher?
Well, back in 1990, I believe it was, I opened my own, training center, a wrestling school, and, found that I really had a passion, really enjoyed watching and developing young talent and helping them learn from where I made my mistakes and watch them go out and build a career and be successful. It was very satisfying to me. And, I enjoyed very much the side of creative side of writing, producing, directing television and wrestling live events because it's just as gratifying to me as it is performing in the ring myself in a match. Being able to, have a vision, an idea, and then help to direct and produce the performances to elicit an emotional response and tell a story that really captures an audience and their imagination. To watch that being done is so awesome to experience it.
I would imagine it would hurt also a lot less.
Well, it does hurt a lot less, yes, and that is a very much a positive, and but it's also very gratifying and satisfying as if I were in the ring myself performing. So.
It's fantastic. It really is. At what point did you then start to, I believe, was it like the mid 2000s when Tough Enough came about? Talk to us a little bit about Tough Enough, because I think it's such an intriguing idea and concept that I think, obviously, it birthed a whole lot of other things, but talk to us a little bit about the idea and concept of Tough Enough.
Well, Tough Enough was during the infancy of reality shows at that time. I think it was The Real World, and I think Survivor had just was created around that same time. And so Tough Enough, it was a concept that had never really been done, and that was to, take young people, not just put them in a house like The Real World and live together, but have them compete for a goal, which was a WWE contract. And I was approached and asked if I wanted to be a part of it, and and I didn't, per se, no. I don't think any of us knew just exactly what it was or what we were going to be doing. And this again was during a time where it wasn't what they call scripted. I think it's scripted reality, where they kind of produce a 13-week episodic show in about 2 weeks. What they did was they literally, had cameras everywhere. They filmed us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and created stories out of those interactions to drive the show. And it was a I loved being part of Tough Enough. Loved the group that I worked with as far as producers and the directors and all of that. It was it was a very awesome time, and I'm very grateful I had the opportunity to be a part of it. And and I would have that opportunity again. I'd do it all over again. It was just such an awesome time in my career.
It really was phenomenal. And I think for the first time, I'm trying to think of the full set of trainers. In the first one, there was obviously yourself, there was Taz, there was Ivory and Tori, I believe. There may have been others in there as well.
Bob Holly, Chavo Guerrero, and Bill DeMott. Yeah.
And the awesome thing about it was that's, for me, certainly where I really got that sneak peek almost into the person behind the wrestler. And again, from your credit, I think it did a lot to really. I don't think it necessarily hurt the business from my perspective. If anything, it actually helped me connect with folks like you all the more, because again, listening to the way that you teach, listening to your perspective and your mindset as well as others, I think that was a really fantastic thing for so many people there. Obviously, I think I'm safe in saying that it did meet with a little bit of upset from, various professional wrestlers and various folks in the industry. And I suppose, what kind of things did you come up against during that era, if anything, for you personally?
Well, you had quite obviously, because wrestling is so competitive. As a business, the existing talent that were in the main roster and they were in the locker room and they're seeing these people, these young people getting an opportunity, they were jealous, and they were, complaining and, saying it's not right. And, of course they were doing everything they could to make it seem as negative as possible, to create an air of unpopularity, and they were, trying to, make a case that eventually it would go away. Because let's face it, I mean, for each one of those young kids that get that opportunity, that's a risk that an existing wrestler might lose their time. They may not longer be with the company because that young wrestler might come up and replace them. So, of course, it was a matter of self-preservation, and fear that the criticism came from. And, it it didn't deter it, at least until MTV decided that they wanted to own all of their content.
Right.
And they made the decision to remove, anything that wasn't MTV produced off of MTV. And then that helped to create an opportunity for those that had, were jealous of the success of the show and of the participants on it, to have it removed, and done away with. The crazy thing is that it was such a great vehicle to, it was a great infomercial for wrestling because it really helped to improve and make somebody appreciate all the work that goes into being a wrestler. And at the same time, it helped draw and attract new fans, because over the years I've had, I don't know how many people come up to me and I never watched wrestling, but I watched Tough Enough and then I started watching wrestling. Or my wife hates wrestling, but she watched Tough Enough and then she started watching wrestling. Because they get caught up in who those kids are, and they get connected to them and they follow them into the main roster, which then garners you that much more of an audience. And and it was a great recruitment tool. It was a great scouting tool. And it was a great way to develop new talent and make them stars before they even got on the main roster and on WWE TV.
I couldn't agree more. The amazing thing about it, so I was just going to say, the amazing thing about it was, what you described there about people trying to protect their spot, easy for me to say, protect their spot, was exactly the same thing that was going on in the 60s, 70s, 80s when those guys were trying to break in as well. And I always find that amusing, always trying to protect the spot, because again, that person that comes in could spell the difference between you making a lot of money and in some cases going out of business, depending on who it is.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. But it's just human nature. It's self-preservation,
Definitely. In some ways, looking back at it from what you just described there, I mean, my wheels are always turning, thinking about stuff like that. And it's almost like a missed opportunity. I know they've now, WWE have certainly got it with the NXT and things like that. And, a lot of stuff that's there. But again, I think, like you were saying, making those stars before they ever, got to WWE, because the audience that watched Tough Enough was absolutely humongous. I mean, in some cases, I believe the ratings for Tough Enough was higher than a SmackDown or a Raw taping, which, it doesn't take a genius to realize, hey, we've got something here. Maybe it does. I don't know. Going a little bit deeper, both from what you learned on Tough Enough and what you're doing obviously now with OVW, how important is the mindset of those you are teaching to their success?
It all comes down to passion. That's why, the world's not fair. Quite honestly, the world is fair, I should say. The world is very fair. You get out of it exactly what you put into it. There are challenges. We all face challenges, and not one of us has bigger or more challenges than the other. The old saying about, or the story, I guess you could say, about, a man praying, and he's praying to God, whether you're religious or not. It's just a story to explain that the man's praying to God about asking God why he's given him such a heavy cross to bear. God shows up and, says, because you can carry it. And he's like, but it's so heavy, I don't think that I can do it anymore. Can you lighten it? Can you make it less? And he goes, well, how about you try this cross? And the guy picks up the cross and he's, oh my, that's even heavier. That's well, how about this one? Oh, I can't even walk 2 steps carrying this cross. It's so heavy. And he goes, well, how about this one? And the guy goes, yeah, I can carry the cross. He goes, well, that was the cross you started with.
Yes.
He was picking up other people's crosses and finding out that the weight was much more than he could bear. When he's giving back his own, it was just perfect. It was what he could carry.
Yeah.
And we all have those challenges, all of us. And but you've got to make a decision, a clear-cut decision, that what you want out of life, and then you've got to accept and be totally honest with yourself that you're willing to do the things that others don't do, to live a life that others don't live. If you want to be one of the 1%, well, the reason they call them 1% is because there's only about 1% of the population that are going to do things at that level, to live that type of life. The majority of people are going to be bogged down in complacency and a false sense of security, and prevent themselves from living whatever life they really truly want to live. They're not going to take those steps. They're not going to take those actions. And they're always going to find justification. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way. If you don't, find an excuse. And at the end of the day, it's just, regardless of what the challenges are you face, you'll be able to find a way to overcome those challenges and accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Life is literally, I've heard it described so many times that life is literally, a series of problems that present themselves to us, and then it's our ability to be able to figure out the answers or the solutions. It's like a big problem.
You just have to ask yourself the right questions to get the right answers. Sometimes you're not finding the solution. It's because you're not asking the right questions. You're repeatedly asking the same questions. You're not asking new ones that will, give you a new answer and a new direction. That's just what it is. And, that is the key. It's the most important thing, at least in the art of professional wrestling. Absolutely. And I think, in life, you can do anything and be anything you want to be. Just, do you choose to pursue it? Do you want to do it?
And that's something that I coach on frequently. I know you and I have talked on other shows about it, that, in a world where you can do anything and be anything, people often choose to play it safe and negate, all of their amazing abilities. And they say, well, why should I listen to you? And I'm like, I've made it in the art business. I'm making it as a writer, and I've made it in others, because I decided how to do it. And obviously, since you and I have talked, so much, nearly a year ago now, so much more has happened, and being on here right now and doing the show was as a result of, again, changing the mindset, getting focused on what you want and figuring out how you want to do it.
Well, you can, people don't have to listen to either one of us. Advice, I always say, because it helps keep my peace, is that if you're smart enough, I don't need to tell you. And if you're dumb enough, you're not going to listen anyway. So, they can either, agree with what it is that I'm stating, or they can make an excuse to justify why they're not accomplishing or doing what they want to do, and continue to live the life they want to live. Because at the end of the day, in regards to, again, advice, any decisions that, even I had to learn this with my children, and as they got older, when they were young, I would make all the decisions. The reason that I made all of the decisions was because they were too young to bear the price, the consequence of any decision they made. As they got older, they got to make more decisions because they were able to bear more of the price, more of the consequence. And when they became young adults, they were I had to allow them to make their own decisions, even though I tried, concerned and empathetic and sympathetic to prevent them from making mistakes. I had to make them themselves, and to learn, to get that experience. And now as they are adults, they unquestionably get to make all their own decisions, because at the end of the day, they're the only ones, no matter how much I care and love for them and want to protect them, they're the only ones that are going to wake up with that decision, and they're the only ones that are going to go to bed with it. And, so they can decide whether to listen to me and my advice, or they can decide to ignore my experience and have to find out on their own. And I've got to have the strength to allow them to do that. And that applies to anybody that's listening to this podcast.
Definitely.
It's not that I don't care. It's not that I'm not sympathetic or empathetic, but when I've been alive for 58 years, so I don't know how, and I've been all over the world and have had certain experiences. And if I tell you that the stove is hot, I pretty much guarantee you that the stove is hot and you probably shouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
But I've become of a mindset that I will sit back.
Yeah.
And if I have told you that the stove is hot and you go, oh, what do you know? You don't know anything. Oh, okay. And then I'll let you touch the stove. The reason I'll let you touch the stove, even if my grandchildren who are very young come up and they go to try to touch the stove and I go, hey, don't touch that. That's hot. And they look at me and then go like, what do you know? And they go, I'm going to let them touch the stove. And the reason I am, quite honestly, it sounds cruel. But it's not going to kill them. It's not going to severely injure them. But it's going to give them an understanding of what a concept of make a decision and a consequence.
Definitely.
That's and that people may not agree with that and go, well, your job to protect them. Yeah, it is. And guess what I just did? I then gave that child a very safe learning experience that now is going to protect him in a much greater way for the rest of his life than it ever would if I had not allowed him to touch that stove.
Definitely.
Simple as that, And again, he doesn't have to listen, or she doesn't have to listen. They can touch the stove. And I have witnessed a number of times where I went, don't touch that. It's going to burn you. What do you know? And I'm like, now you know. And
it's true.
To the point, again, all of this is advice.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen to any of it. You feel free to take it, use it, or don't. Again, if you're smart enough, we don't have to tell you. If you're dumb enough, you're not going to listen anyways. So.
I always love those pearls of wisdom that you always bring forth. It's always phenomenal, and it's true. Al and I, between us, I think we've got over nearly 110 years of experience between us. But again, what do we know? You're going through something completely different.
True.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers. I don't. I'm figuring it out and making it up as I go along myself. I am, when I tell people all the time that, especially when it comes to professional wrestling and training people, I'm not teaching you. Okay, the best teachers are not teachers that are teaching you information based on what they know. They are people that are teaching you based on their experience, where they've made mistakes, they've seen where it doesn't work, and they've touched the stove, it's burnt them, and now they're preventing you from doing so. Because they're like, hey, you need to get an oven mitt before you go and open the oven door because you're going to burn your hand. Because how do you know? Well, because I didn't get an oven mitt, I opened the stove and I burnt my hand. And because when you are trying to pursue anything, whatever it may be, a vocation, a hobby, a new skill, look for mentors, look for teachers, look for professors that may not necessarily have the greatest amount of information on the topic, but they have had the greatest amount of experience in that particular topic or pursuit, because they're going to be able to teach you more, because they have made the mistakes along the way, and they can help you, not make those same mistakes. And when you will, no matter what it is you pursue, if you pursue it enough, you will get an opportunity. And the key is that you have enough real knowledge at that moment when that opportunity comes along to really capitalize and take advantage of it and exploit it to its fullest potential.
Because that's the other thing, I think it was Earl Nightingale that said it best, those who have the opportunity, it's going to either expose them or it's going to make them. And, you know this all the time. that's part of the reason now that I'm studying for a doctorate in psychology, not necessarily just because of the position and the accreditation. All that's fine and great, it opens doors, but it's the knowledge that it can give, because now I'm taking the experience that I've had and obviously applying it elsewhere as well. Obviously, we could talk obviously for hours, but as we're coming to the end of our time together, I want to ask you, what do you think the future looks like for professional wrestling?
I don't know. I don't
Mhm.
know what the future for professional wrestling looks like. I worry, um, because back in 1961, when on a Friday night, um, Buddy Rogers and Pat O'Connor
Mhm.
drew 38,000 people to Kaminsky Park here in the United States, in Chicago. Um, the next day, Saturday night, roller derby. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but roller derby um, it drew 44,000 people
Mhm.
in Kaminsky Park, same park, the next day, 44,000 people. You don't see roller derby anymore anywhere in the
Yeah.
world. It ceased to exist. And
Mhm.
the reason it ceased to exist is that the art of it that was performed
Mhm.
was so changed by the performers themselves that it ceased to be intrinsically what it
Mhm.
was originally. And it ceased to exist. And I can see basically that happening in professional wrestling. That that it's diverged so far
Mhm.
from the intrinsic things that are really supposed to be sold to an audience.
Yeah.
It's being diverged and recreated in such a point that it's ceasing to be what it has been
Mhm.
since the late 1800s on,
Yeah.
into something new. And if it becomes something new, then it'll cease to exist. Magic's been around for centuries.
Mhm.
Okay, and let's face it, there is one aspect, only one aspect of magic that's intrinsically fake. It's real. That you, the audience, are wanting to believe in, and that is that the magician is on stage and can actually defy the laws of physics, gravity, and alter reality at a whim.
Yeah.
That is what a magician's selling. A magician's selling you on the well, hey, I know that he's not supposed to be able to do that. How did he do that?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I can't figure it out. He clearly it must be magic because there's no logical explanation behind it. That's what a magician's selling, and that is better a magician is at
Mhm.
selling that to an audience, the more an audience a magician will have. The two things that are intrinsic to professional wrestling, to the art of professional wrestling, are who the persona is, the personality, the character is, and why are they in the ring? Why are they?
Mhm.
Or what? Are they attempting to win? Are they trying to right a wrong? Ultimately, it's the physical art of storytelling in a context of a competitive situation. When that ceases to be what it is, when the performers are now trying to sell you, the audience, something different, you're not going to go and want to watch it anymore.
Yeah. Definitely. I think it's a phenomenal thing. It's something that I've noticed for a long time and certainly in our own business. And I noticed it certainly with the WWE. Whenever you try to go away from your core, values and your core product, your business oftentimes suffers. And, I found that for years before I found ways to, be able to build new audiences for Mind, Body, and Soul and for all the other areas that we're working with. What I find really interesting, and you hit the nail on the head, actually, and I'm glad in some ways I'm not the only one, but taking it a step further, when I look at the WWE, for example, and I see what's happening with AEW and, and they're growing, they're doing a phenomenal job. And I look at it and I'm like, everything at some point is going to have its end point. And is that going
Oh
to be a
yeah.
case that WWE and it seems bizarre to say it. And if you were looking at the 80s or 90s, but it's like, is WWE on the way out? As
I don't
crazy as
know
that
if they
sounds.
are, not sure. I wouldn't go that far, but you're right. Everything dies. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Everything in the entire universe dies. Everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Everything is a story, and all stories at some point end. Um, and the story of WWE obviously will have an ending. I mean, it's not going to go on in perpetuity. That there's just nothing is immortal, and that even goes for WWE. But if WWE ceases to exist, that doesn't mean that's the end of the art of professional wrestling.
Definitely.
It's the end of the probably the greatest and largest platform for professional wrestling, but it's not the end of professional wrestling. WWE is not the be all of professional wrestling, but that unfortunately it's become an iconic brand to the degree that WWE is wrestling. But it's not in the sense that if it ceases to exist, wrestling will cease to exist. As long as the performers themselves continue to sell what's intrinsic in that audience has always bought into and wanted to believe in, then it'll always continue.
It's almost the same for the dinosaurs. When they died out, it opened up opportunities then for other people or for other beings and creatures, shall we say. And it's exactly the same for the WWE, for whoever, when there's an end and a death of a business or a person or whatever, it opens up opportunities as well. So it's perhaps an exciting time as well. Al, just as we come to the close of this show, I've got to ask you, what's next for you? And is there any final things that you'd like to cover?
Well, what's next for me is just continuing to, work on and build OVW and the talent, the roster, develop them and, do everything I can to help their success because their success is mine. And to just try to live life as much and have as much fun and enjoy myself as much as possible. Going forward, I've determined that I'm going to live to 97, and at 97, I'm just going to quietly slip away, and I figure that's a good enough age. So.
It's an interesting one. So you've still got another, nearly 30 years. Well, yeah, nearly 30 years, to go. So that's
right.
It's not bad at all. So
no,
not
at all.
Still doing the next 30 years.
Yeah, it's next nearly 40. So by that time I'll be ready to punch out and.
I've made the decision that I want to go as long as possible. So if I can make it to that 120, that'll secure a lot of things by that point.
I want to be virile, and healthy till 97, and 97, boom. Because at a certain point, you get so old, you start to look like one of the creatures from The Hobbit, or from a fantasy film. You look like one of the trolls, or witches, or something. So.
It's true.
I'll be
by
good.
that point, who knows? We might end up being, rebuilt with plastic and all sorts of other stuff. So it might be better.
I already am. I've replaced both my knees, and they're titanium with plastic bumpers inside. So, I'm on my way.
Oh boy. Well, it's been a tremendous amount of fun. We're just going to quickly see the comments that are there. Folks that are saying thank you for all the perspective on the advice and how to help one succeed in life and what path to take. It's interesting hearing about the stories of wrestling and that you're still monitoring individuals for their success. Lots of really positive comments there, and we want to thank you guys for watching. Obviously, we want to thank our awesome guest, as always, the great Al Snow. And folks, if you've enjoyed this, make sure to let the Tribune know. Don't forget to share this, let people know. You can get in touch with me at thejohnmorris.co.uk, and Al Snow, you type him in anywhere on Google, you're going to find him. And check out OVW as well. And we would love for you guys to come back and join us again next week for another exclusive and another special guest. So we'll see you next time, folks. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you soon.